How's it going, guys? It's Eclipse here, and today we have got two brand new vehicles that are going to be coming in on Tuesday next week. These are the kind of Halloween themed tanks that come into World of Tanks Modern Armor every year, and usually we have, 1 to 2 of them that come in every single year, and this year is no different. There are two brand new vehicles that are coming in. We're going to take a look at them, we're going to cover all of the stats of them, and also give you a bit of context if you've not seen some of the Halloween events from previous years, or maybe you haven't played in a while, you've forgotten about them. We'll kind of cover exactly what sort of things happen during these events and how you can pick up free Monster Hunter tanks as well. That is usually one Monster Hunter tank every single year as well. So starting off, what are the two brand new Halloween vehicles? So obviously this one being a vampire versus vampire hunter themed operation, or at least a challenge that's coming in, or at least that's the theme of this year's Halloween. And so with the two new tanks, of course, you've got two different things. So the first one being Camilla, as you can see right here. This is the one that we're going to be able to get. It's a commander that you can have in the game, a 3D commander at that. So these are all of the different variants, I suppose, that you can have. But that's not everything. Obviously, then you've got Van Helsing, which you can see here. So this is the first one, and you can see a second look at him and from behind, etc. So yeah, I mean, it's Van Helsing that you can have in the game, and of course you're going to have to either purchase them or get them from an operation, but of course these ones I believe will be purchasable, but we'll get into that later on in the video. But then we move into the first vehicle, which is the Night Stalker. So this is a World War II Tier 9 vehicle that you can actually play. And so obviously Monster Hunter tanks, as a bit of background, you can have them normally. They work just as a normal vehicle that's in the game, but they also have the ability to play on the Monster Unleashed game mode that kind of comes out, which is like the themed event that happens during Halloween. And they have like special abilities. Each Monster Hunter vehicle usually has its own unique ability that you can use within that game mode. So something like a Lycan, I believe, can go invisible, something like that, or teleport. Can't quite remember, but yeah, or maybe it has increased attack speed. There's a wide variety of different tanks. So there's like a Dragon WZ-131 or something like that, which is like a light tank, and then you've got a load of different ones as well, which we can take a look at, because that's all themed around the operation. The ones that I would recommend when the operation does eventually come around for Halloween. No confirmation, as at least from what I can tell, as to whether that is going to be a thing again this year. Now I would assume pretty much guaranteed that it will be, because that's what they've done every year, but you never know with wargaming, and I definitely don't know at this point. So the Night Stalker Tier 9, this is what it looks like, at least from what we can see. So looks kind of interesting, but then again, I don't know, they're all made up tanks, so I guess depends on what your view on made up vehicles actually is. But this one plays up to Tier 9, obviously a Tier 10 even. Obviously it's a Tier 9. Gets 1900 hit points. This one is indeed a tank destroyer, so going to be playing that tank destroyer role. It's got 2 barrels, so obviously assuming that it is going to be a double-barreled vehicle. So you can see, pierce the enemy skin armor with your dual 105mm rocket, which have a 6-round clip, 3 per barrel. The high penetration values of your rockets will make mincemeat out of your opponents. Well, we'll see about that in the stats. Position yourself to take advantage of this tank's strong frontal armor and well-sloped panels, which will help you deflect incoming rounds. Well, if we had the armor in the way that we actually want to tell us what the values are, then we'd be able to make a comment as to whether the armor will work. But if not, we'll take a look at it in an upcoming video next week. When this does actually drop onto the game, I'll be able to test it out and showcase it to you guys. And of course, you can hold off from buying any of these tanks until you see reviews from, any one of the content creators in the game or any of the streamers, etc. I highly recommend checking it out before you make any purchases when it comes to these sorts of stuff, if you're interested in getting a decent vehicle and one that's fun to play. Like, you know, if you just want to do it because it's a collector's item, you're a whale of World of Tanks, you're going to buy it anyway. But at the same time, if you are wondering whether to purchase it, I'd highly recommend checking out reviews before you go ahead and buy it, because they are very expensive. So obviously this one, 16 kilometers an hour power to, or 16 power to weight ratio, but its top speed limit is 48, so it's not the fastest, and it's certainly not going to get up to the top speed the fastest either. So yeah, you're kind of in that mid-range of TD mobility and nothing spectacular there, but it's not slow. Whole traverse, you got 34 degrees a second, turret traverse 20 degrees a second, so once again probably on the lower end. It looks like this one actually has a 180 degree spread as well, so, or 105 either side, so you can't fully traverse the turret, as you can see, obviously primarily because you've got a big box behind of where your turret actually is. So 100 degrees to one side, so slightly more than 90. Obviously 105, you guys aren't stupid, but my point being is that you can actually look slightly behind you on one side and then slightly behind you on the other, which is okay. It's better than most of the non-turreted TDs in the game, which, you know, as a non-turreted TD should be pretty decent. This one gets a 10 degrees of gun depression. Now I would assume that this varies dependent on where you're looking on the tank. Nothing shown here. We don't get like an arc as to where the gun depression is maximum. I would assume over the front you get 10 degrees, maybe over this kind of corner towards the side, maybe slightly less, but it's unknown at this point, and so I don't want to make that statement, but I would assume that given some of the other tanks that are very similar to this do have that problem, that they have decreased gun depression over the side sometimes, then yeah, it could be a potential thing. And then of course you've got 280 penetration on your standard rounds, which is actually pretty good for a tier 9, with 320 damage. Now damage wise it is on the low end, and it's probably going to be, I'm hesitant to say it's going to be terrible, but as long as the DPM of this tank is actually good, then I think you won't have any problems with that. And considering that you're an auto loader, or at least a like clippable loader, I don't know what you want to call them, it's a weird one. It's a double barrel auto loader. Yeah, strange one. But either way, you've got 6 rounds that can fire out this tank with a 2-second inch clip, so actually a decent inch clip reload. Now, Wargaming recently have just been making a load of autoloaders that have basically just shy of a normal reload from the intraclip reload. So intraclip being the time between when you can fire off each of the individual rounds out of the tank. This one has 2 seconds in between, so pretty good. You won't find a 320 alpha damage main armament in World of Tanks that can do that in 2 seconds. It's more like 5-6 seconds, something like that is like a more reasonable, even with all of the boosts that you get from equipment and crew skills. You will never get close to 2 seconds, which makes it an advantageous position. Now we see it with some of them that with an intraclip reload of like 8 seconds, for example, and a typical reload would be 10 seconds on like a single shot. So it kind of makes the whole point of using an autoloader pointless, and so everything else about the tank has to be good. But usually Wargaming try and balance a tank that has an autoloader by making it worse in all of the other departments. So we find sometimes that autoloaders can be really severely bad in the game, at least that's from my point of view, depending on how they go about it, and it's usually to do with that intraclip. So this one looks pretty good from that solid standpoint. And the damage per minute of this tank, 4,115 DPM with this tank. That is crazy. That's the base value as well. Remember, this is a tier 9. It's not a tier 10. This is a tier 9 tank destroyer with 4,115 DPM as a auto-loading vehicle. Now, this is a bit scary because of the fact that when you start adding in some of the perks that you can put on, now granted you can't put on advanced loader in your equipment because it's an autoloader, you can't use that, but if you're putting on improved ventilation and you're whacking on your crew skills like rapid loading, I'm sure you can get the DPM somewhere in the region of about 4,800 DPM, something like that. Or at least there or thereabouts, with enhanced combat rations as well added in there. I would assume, yeah, you're sitting around 4,800 DPM, which is like upper limit of some of the Cold War vehicles in the game. So yeah, that is very, very good in terms of DPM, and I think that is going to make the tank. Remember, the current meta within World of Tanks console is that DPM and speed are kind of your ultimate things. Armor is like on the lowest tier, in my opinion, as to whether it actually is useful for a tank. Like, in terms of like the priority list, I want speed, then I want DPM, then I want view range, and then, you know, you start looking into like armor effectiveness and that sort of stuff as kind of the lower end stuff, because you want to rely on you being better than the opponent. And so all of these kind of increases in damage that you can deal, you can negate the impacts of armor by avoiding being spotted, that sort of stuff, and using concealment and camo, as opposed to kind of just sitting there and hoping that your armor actually does the job. That's kind of why armor is one of the least effective ways, because if you're relying on armor to save you in a game, you've probably played badly. So yeah, that's kind of how you get through. Obviously that's not always the case, but you get my drift. Like, you don't want to be relying on your tank to actually save you. You want to be able to rely on like the upper limit of your skills to actually come out with the best results. So that's kind of what I always assume when I come into a tank review. And I thought I'd give a bit of background, because that's kind of what some of the players who have played for a long time will understand, that you don't want to be relying on armor ever. But this tank does have a little bit of armor from what it looks like. Now, whether it is super effective, I'm not entirely sure. It looks like, since the slopes are on the side as well, that you could end up with some really horrible bounces if you're coming up against this tank. Like, you're assuming that you're going to pen on the side and it actually ends up bouncing off because it's so well angled. Kind of reminds me of what you would see with like a T95, where you can get these weird bouncy angles that actually end up, you know, bouncing rounds where you wouldn't have thought that they would. So I would definitely be thinking, when I'm coming up against this in the side, if we can get a side profile here, I think we just went past it. So here I would be shooting below these kind of spaced or angled armor parts at the top, just underneath this kind of track guard or mud guard or whatever you want to call it. Apologies, I am not a tank expert. I just know how to play tanks on World of Tanks. But you go underneath here and like the mud flap, and then you'll go through the tracks and into the flat bit of armor behind of the hull. So that's going to make it much, much easier to pen. And yeah, maybe if you have super high pen, you'll just go straight through the angled armor. But just as a word of advice, is that if you do come up against it from behind, you might actually want to avoid hitting the top bit if you auto aiming, because it looks like center of mass is going to be slightly above, especially at the back, where you would hit into the side of the tank, like on the flat piece of armor behind. So yeah, you can definitely see this tank pulling off a few bounces just from the weird angles and stuff like that. So yeah, what do I think about it? Do I think it's going to be overpowered, crazy, the best tier 9 in the game? No, I don't think it's going to be the best tier 9 in the game, because simply the negatives of not having a fully traversable turret, alongside the fact that it isn't the fastest tank in the game, and the fact that the turning speed is quite slow, means that if you do get out traversed by people, it's just going to make things more difficult, and you may not be able to use the DPM that you have. But I'm sure that when you get into those longer range engagements where you're using it more like a tank destroyer, that you're going to start absolutely dominating people with the DPM that this tank has. The actual overall reload of the tank as well is only 18 seconds, so it's not like you're spending a huge amount of time sat there doing absolutely nothing, like you might see with something like a G-Saw 1008, where at tier 8 that is like a pretty decent tank, but that has the significant downside of having like a 40-second reload or something like that, whereas this only 18, so it's like, you know, you're playing almost like a 750 alpha damage tank destroyer, but you'll get 6 shells for every single one that they get. Obviously that will come down with the perks and equipment that you've got on, and so it's going to get even better. But yeah, looking really quite strong from that like sniper engagement role, and I'm sure as you start to develop your skills in the tank, can actually be a very, very competitive one. But yet again, we'll have to see what it's actually like in the game to determine whether or not it's going to be like crazy good. I mean, just from an accuracy standpoint, 0.2 as a base value, this looks absolutely broken. But of course, the problem with it is also that you are using rockets as opposed to normal rounds, so you've got that very, very slow movement speed with those rockets. So I think that could probably be a big downside for playing a tank like this, having slower rounds and a lot of HE within the game. And so, although it might be fun to play and actually very, very good in certain situations, because of that DPM, the actual use and effective use of the DPM might be quite considerably lower. And if you're not good at leading shots in World of Tanks, then you're going to find this a very, very big struggle to actually make work, especially with the longer lead times that you have to give and just the overall experience of the tank. Yeah, I think it's definitely one to check out the reviews before you go and spend in, because although on paper it looks like it could be quite good, there's also those concerning factors like the speed of the rounds and also not having a fully traversable turret alongside a pretty slow turning speed as well, and the overall speed not being crazy good either. So yeah, looks interesting. I like this type of idea. I like that they're experimenting with a bit more nuanced ideas than their typical, like, you know, let's just give it an autoloader with high pen and, you know, be decent DPM where we're just going to sell a lot. I much prefer the unique aspect where you got a different thing. You know, you can choose to play a tank that is slightly different. And there wasn't a whole lot of that in the last like 2, 3, 4, 5 years that we've been playing World of Tanks console for and making videos. So having tanks like this, although it might not appeal to everyone, is I think better for the overall experience when people come to choose tanks that might be a bit different. So yeah, I think that's kind of cool. And now, if you want to purchase the tank, it's going to be quite expensive, I believe. So we'll get into the price points later on. But let's first talk about the actual Awakened version of the tank. So Awakened is basically what they call the event game mode type of vehicle. So when it gets boosted to the event. And so this one, it comes in, obviously, tier 9. All tanks end up being tier 9 in the event mode, obviously because they want them to be somewhat similar. But this one has Awakened Power Bloodlust. Now, with the Bloodlust ability, imagine yourself as a vampire getting stronger as it drinks its victim's blood. So over time, so the first initial kind of power that you do on a tank is going to be quite slow, and it's going to build up to more and more damage. Once you fill the Night Stalker's Bloodlust meter, you can activate Bloodlust mode and enter a heightened state in which your tank is more effective and gains enhanced vision. So essentially what you'd be doing is kind of, as you deal more and more damage, you're dealing more damage, and you're also getting that effective meter where you get increased view range or vision. So the Bloodlust state, once your Bloodlust meter is full, you can activate its power by pressing left on the D-pad, and Bloodlust lasts for 20 seconds. When you activate it, bats swarm around your tank, and your tank visibility glows with a deadly red glow. So as you can see here, enhanced vision activates, making enemies much easier to see, and will also highlight players playing the Awakened Revenant Craft Panther, which is the completely invisible tank in the game. So yeah, that's kind of cool as well. Your tank fires in double shot mode, shooting from both barrels at the same time. All of your tank stats are heightened, so for example DPM, reload, your accuracy, that sort of stuff as well. And if you destroy a tank prior to activating Bloodlust, you'll receive an additional performance boost while in the Bloodlust state. So if you take someone out before you enter it, you'll actually end up with increased stats, basically. When Bloodlust ends, you enter a cooldown period. Cooldown lasts for 10 seconds, and while in cooldown, your meter will not charge at all, and doing damage will not fill your meter. Destroying a tank will bypass your cooldown, instantly fill your meter, and unlock the Bloodlust enhanced state as well. So if you take someone out even when you've just gone into a Bloodlust, you will then get it back. So this could be quite good. Your tank fires in single fire mode. And so that's kind of like when you're in the cooldown state, so you don't get the double barreled aspect. But yeah, looks very, very nice, and you can see this is kind of what it looks like in the game. This is the Bloodlust meter, so bright red. Looks kind of weird and probably not actually useful because it's covering your vision. As you can see, there's an enemy over to the right, which is very difficult to actually see. But yeah, strange. It looks kind of cool though. And so yeah, that is basically it. Stats wise, this is what you can see. They have different stats to where the normal tank is. But for those of you wondering, I'm not going to go through it all, but you've got a flintlock and a flintlock, which is what they're calling it, as your left and right barrel, and they basically fire the same rounds, 360 damage, 226 pen, and life drain is what they have, as well as explosive rounds as well. So 2 different types of rounds that deal more damage or have less damage depending on which one you're using. So yeah, it looks kind of interesting. And then we run into the Cold War Monster Hunter vehicle, which is the Monster Jaeger. I mean, this one looks pretty cool, I won't lie. It looks kind of cool, but at the same time, you know, historically accuracy, probably not very historically accurate, with a crossbow on the top of the tank. But this one, yet again, has 2 different barrels with a crossbow. The crossbow probably not actually going to work in Cold War, and probably wouldn't be very effective either. But at the same time, once the actual tank itself is what they've essentially called it. So to combat the blood-sucking menace that assails us, let us fortify such vehicles as we command with twice as much firepower as we have used before. That this beast might succumb to our glorious light, Abraham Van Helsing, Tank Commander. So gameplay tips. Once you've sighted your quarry, attack the beast with a devastating rocket barrage. Your weapon is a 10-round dual rocket launching autocannon that unleashes all 10 rockets in just 1.8 seconds. Use it wisely. These rockets are forged out of the finest monster hunting materials and designed to pierce even the most heavily armored beast that Monster Jaeger comes across, with 450 or millimeters of penetration. So this is the base of a light tank. Not the upgraded or awakened version of it that happens in the event mode. So this one gets a 55% silver bonus, which is actually quite good. You get 15% tank XP bonus and a 15% commander XP bonus. 2,350 hit points is okay. 26.91 power to weight is actually pretty good. And then a 64 kilometers an hour top speed makes it fairly fast. And so this one, it is supposed to be a tank destroyer, but it's quite a fast one. Hull and turret traverse are on the lower end. It's not crazy fast at turning, but it's not awful. 10 degrees gun depression, 450 pen with your standard, but it only does 180 damage. So over the course of those 1.8 seconds that it takes to unload all of those kind of rounds out of your vehicle, you'll have done 1.8 thousand damage. So pretty quick. The overall reload of the tank is 26 seconds, so your DPM is, you know, not awful, but as an Era 2, it's not terrible. 3,884 damage, and with those high penetration standard rounds, it's actually going to be easy to pen things. Not crazy easy for an Era 2, like if you come up against some of the more heavily armored things, but it's actually pretty good. And then you've got the kind of secondary rockets, which have 175 pen with 225 damage. I don't think these are going to be insanely useful, and they are very, very slow as well, 520 meters a second compared to the 920 with the standard rounds. So I think most people are going to fire off the standard rounds in this tank. Gets good view range, 515 meters, which is okay. Aim time is 1 second, accuracy is 0.15, and the interclip reload is 0.2, which is pretty crazy. So overall, it looks okay. It looks okay. But I don't think it's going to be crazy good, and I think there are probably better options in Cold War for a vehicle like this. It has absolutely no armor as well, by the way, so you are going to get penned by everything, and so you're going to have to rely on the camouflage. They haven't actually given us still concealment values in here, which is kind of a bit annoying, but I would assume it's got pretty decent camo. But as soon as you unleash your kind of speed dump rockets, I would assume that it's going to get very bad. So that's like an additional extra to kind of keep in mind with the tank like this. And then of course the upgraded awakened version of the tank has stake driver crossbow. So best against monsters that are weak to piercing damage, which include the Rampanzer, Asterion, Roswell, the Bellerophon, Bog Horror, the Creature, and the Monster Jaeger. So those are the ones that are weak to it. You've got Trophy Taker, so silver bullets, which go against the Lycan. Obviously, Lycan being a kind of, I guess, a werewolf variant, or whatever, the same as a werewolf. You guys get more what I mean. The Hollenhund, so the Hellhound, Inferno Chimera, so being like a lion with some like a dragon wings or like eagle wings. I can't quite remember, and a lion's head. Dragon type 62, Goronich, KV5, the Arachnid, the Fangula, and the Kaiju OI. And then you've got Holy Water Cannon, which goes against the Craft Panther, Death Chariot, Wraith Panzer 58, the Pharaoh, Fury, Ramses II, the Spectre, and the Night Stalker. So obviously the Night Stalker being the previous tank that we've looked at. But yeah, honouring Van Helsing's careful research and polymath skills, Monster Jaeger's awakened form, utilises the full arsenal, blah blah blah. Anyone who wishes to succeed with this tank will need to use the correct weapon for each of the tanks. Awakened Monster Jaeger's arsenal can be seen below, so those are the ones that we covered. So I'm assuming you just do more damage with each one of these different types of rounds, depending on what you're hitting. So you're going to want to use the right one for each one. And then, of course, the tank itself plays up to tier 10 because it's in the Monster Hunter mode, so it doesn't matter. You've got 300% Commander XP bonus, which is nice, 2.35 thousand hit points. Power to weight ratio 12.89, so it's quite slow, but it gets a top speed limit of 70 kilometers an hour. Hull traverse 38, turret traverse 24, so quite slow. 10 degrees of gun depression. And then in here you've got basically your different types of rounds and how much damage they deal. So the first one, the Stake Driver, 330 PEM with 220 damage. And you have an aim time of 1 second, accuracy of 0.35 with a standard kind of main armament. So it's not like mag dumping people with a rocket anymore. This is like single shot. Except from the final one, which is the Holy Water Cannon. So you've got the Stake Driver is a single shot. Trophy Taker also being a single shot with 420 damage, 268 pen, and a slightly longer reload. And so yeah, that's kind of what you've got, the difference between the two. And then the final one, the Holy Water Cannon. This one has 100 pen, 30 damage, and 1.8 second aim time with 0.3 accuracy. And the rate of fire, 550.93 rounds a minute. So damage per minute, 3,600. But obviously you've got to pen things with 100 pen, which may be slightly difficult in the Monster Hunter mode, playing up against some of the more heavily armoured tanks that you've got in the game. So yeah, looks like a fun one. I think it will be cool. And for those of you wanting a more kind of Halloween themed vehicle to kind of have in your garage and play and just enjoy for the sake of playing the tank as opposed to being the most competitive, I think that this one could definitely be a bit of fun. But should you go out and buy them? Because that is the main thing. Are they going to be worth your hard-earned cash? How much are they going to cost? So Halloween 2024. So if you want absolutely everything that's covered with the latest releases, so the things that have come out this year, which include the two tanks. So obviously the Night Stalker, the Monster Jaeger, the Camilla, the 3D Hero Commander, and Van Helsing's 3D Hero, and the Camilla Unveiled Commander skin as well. It'll cost you 24,500 gold. That is £69.99, I believe, off the top of my head. Now, don't quote me on it. I think it's about £69 or like $100 or something crazy. Are these tanks actually going to be worth $100 or like £70? I do not think so. I don't think any tank in the game is worth £35 on its own. It's a crazy price. You can go out and buy the whole entire Diablo 4 expansion and play that. It's going to give you far more enjoyment if you play something like Diablo, or go out and buy an entire game or multiple games off of some of the Xbox Store deals that you'll see and the PlayStation Store deals. You'll get more enjoyment out of doing that than you will buying a vehicle on this game. That being said, if you do want to spend your money, would I recommend spending it on these tanks? No, I don't think that these are anywhere near the price point that I think is actually deemed fair for a tank like this. So no, I don't think that it is a decent price at all for the tanks that we're seeing here. And at a later date down the line, you can probably pick up these tanks anyway as part of the operation. And yeah, so no, I don't think it is entirely worth it. You can buy the tanks on their own for 15,000 gold, but yet again, that is the Night Stalker with a Hero Commander and a Hero Commander skin, and then you've got the Monster Jaeger on its own with a Hero Commander, 12,500, and then you can buy just the two tanks for 23,000 gold. So wow, what a saving! 1,000 gold, and you lose all of the Hero Commanders and the skin. Yeah, it's very expensive, and I just can't be saying that it's decent and worth your money at all for buying both of these tanks. They're stupidly expensive, and so yeah, go and spend your money doing something far more enjoyable. Save it up for a holiday, go to the somewhere sunny or whatever, or somewhere cold if you live in somewhere sunny, and yeah, I think that would be a better use of your money than spending it on these tanks, at least, yeah, unless you've got millions of pounds and you don't care about spending 30 quid on a tank on a game. But for the majority of people, I don't think this is worth it at all. But one final thing before we end the video though is Monster Hunters. So this was the previous operation. Now I wanted to give a bit of background as to what happens during the event. So this was on the 17th of October last year, this year 15th of October, and so this is last year's event. This is not what's happening this year. It's just what I would speculate is going to be a similar sort of thing. So essentially it's a point operation, op it usually is, whereby you play games and you earn points, and then with those points you can basically purchase a vehicle from all of the different Monster Hunter tanks that are in the game. So you can see here we had the Arachnid, Asterion, Death Chariot as kind of the top tier rewards. The top tier rewards are always the previous seasons or the previous years Monster Hunter tanks, so you're kind of like a year behind when it comes to the operation. You can't get the year or the release tanks that came out at the year of that Monster Hunter op. So this year we will not be able to pick up these two tanks for free, but next year probably will be able to. And so the new releases last year were I can't remember now, it's been so long, but essentially they released new tanks, and so with that you'll basically get the previous one. So this was like the Fangula AE or something like that, which was added in. And then of course, like all of these different earn operations, you earn X amount of points and then you spend them when you get those points. Now when you spend your points on the operation, typically what happens is you cannot earn any more points. After you've unlocked one of the tanks, you cannot earn the next tank. So when you spend those points on an operation, you will not be able to get those points back. So for example, if you ground all the way out to maybe you got the unlock for Monster Hunter 13 last year, and then you went ahead and didn't realize and spent it on, I don't know, let's find one, wherever the first set of tankers is, and you went and spent 50 points on the Lycan T71, and then you realized, oh, now I don't have access to buy any of the others. That's why. So do not spend your actual points until you know exactly which one that you want to get. So just be aware of that. Don't spend them on the additional things that come with the operation, like the tanks like here, because that's going to mean that you don't get the tank that you actually want. So you can only get one Monster Hunter tank every year. That's how it's been for a couple of years. I believe when they first introduced it, you could just repeatedly do it, but it was very difficult to actually get the points in the first place. So that was kind of how it was. And so, you'd have to play like probably 24 hours to be able to unlock like 3 or 4 of the Monster Hunter tanks total time. Obviously not in one go. Maybe some people did, but it's going to take you a long time to actually unlock it. I don't know why Wargaming don't just do that anyway and just allow people to get multiple rewards, because it takes a lot of time and people are going to be playing the game more and that sort of stuff. So that's kind of what I would recommend to Wargaming to open up these operations with, and hopefully they do that this year. But we'll see on Tuesday. I'll cover all of the latest update news for Tuesday and when that does come out. But I wanted to make this video today to showcase off what these two new tanks actually are and what happens during those Halloween events. So with that being said, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like it, and of course I will see you in the next video coming soon. Goodbye.